morning. I would like to talk a little bit about alien invasions. And as you know, we live in this beautiful, round, colorful planet. And yes, it is round for sure. And this planet is full of life. This life is very diverse. It comes in different colors, shapes, forms, and behaviors. Plants, animals, fungi, bacteria, and other kinds of microbes interact with each other, creating immense biodiversity. It's really diverse. Rainforests are only 12% of the land cover of our planet, yet they harbor about 50% of all terrestrial life. Similarly, coral reefs cover less than 1% of the ocean floors, and they are home for about 25% of all marine life. But don't think that only those places that we know that are good places for life are home for some specific biodiversity. Deserts seem barren, but amazing kinds of life also develop and find their perfect home in those environments. Freezing temperatures are also not enough to intimidate life from living, thriving, reproducing, and amazing us with pictures like that. Life comes in all sizes, from the biggest animal that has ever lived, the blue whale, to this minuscule, very cute Daphnia. It's pregnant, you can see. It's carrying its babies on its back. Yeah, I told you, there is a lot of diversity. But all this diversity is threatened. And if we don't take action, if we don't understand those threats, a lot of it can vanish. One of the biggest threats for diversity on Earth is aliens. And yeah, I'm sorry, but not exactly this kind of aliens. I'm an invasion biologist, and in my field, we consider aliens species that have been moved around the planet, either on purpose or by accident, or just facilitated by humans. So an alien species is a species that has been taken out of its native range, introduced in another parts of the planet, and has established a population there. Not all aliens are bad, but about 20% of aliens can cause some damage to the local environment, and those are which we call invasive species. And the aliens are everywhere. In this map here, you can see, sorry, just 1 second, I want to get the, okay, I'm sorry that the bar is not showing here, but sorry, technical issues. So the bar is very simple, from low to high. In red, you see areas with low alien populations, but the darker blues, the numbers that you don't see down there, are about 6,000 species, which means that North America, Europe, and Oceania are the continents with the higher numbers of aliens. And 6,000 species is not little. There are some environments where aliens are actually more numerous than the native species. So it's a serious issue. In Israel, there are hundreds of aliens established. You probably have seen some of them if you dive, but even if you just walk here around the park, this species of South American parrots is everywhere around the Mediterranean. And despite being cute, it makes a lot of noise, which makes the birds and the local birds cannot communicate to each other. In some areas, all singing birds, those that sing, that they learn their songs from others, they are getting to the point that they don't learn how to sing and talk to the others because of the noise that these animals make. So different kinds of aliens can have different impacts, but many of them are very serious threats to the local environment. They don't affect only biodiversity, they also affect human health, like mosquitoes transmitting diseases, and they cause very high economic costs. This is an example of an alien medusa that has clogged pipes in power plants, and this is like one of the huge costs of dealing with aliens. So science can help us, as normally. There are billions of species observations every day. Scientists are collecting data, but not only science. People that are interested go out and observe plants, animals, and then they take pictures and they have a location for that. So we have the information that a given species was seen somewhere, we have the coordinates, we know where the species are. At the same time, we have available data on the environmental conditions. We have data on temperature, on precipitation, also water parameters like salinity, chlorophyll, primary production. And we can combine these two kinds of data to try to understand what a species likes in a given place. So that's a method that we use in ecology and biology in general. It's called species distribution models, so SDMs for short. And what we do is that we have the occurrence data, we know where the species was seen, and we know the conditions. So we combine that through algorithms, and you understand what are the conditions that a species likes to thrive. And then we can see where else in the world you find these conditions, and we can project and understand where the species are. This kind of approach has been used for the last 40 years and is very successful. It's a great tool for conservation biology, for agriculture, amongst others. The problem is that it seems to work well for other implications, but it doesn't work very well for alien invasions. So we try to predict where the species is going to find the conditions and where species could become alien, but many times we fail. Why? Just like us, species tend to behave differently if they leave their home and go somewhere else. The lionfish, for example, eats different things in their native range here in the Red Sea and in the alien range represented here for this area around Cyprus. So in the native range, it tends to eat more crabs. When it arrives in the Mediterranean, it even gets chubby because it eats all the blennies, those very cute fish. And the species changes completely what it's doing. So observing it in the native range gives us an idea of what it can do, but then it behaves differently when we see the species as an alien. Here in this simplistic graph, we see just two variables to make it easy to understand. Let's say those are the limits that the species can live of salinity and temperature. The green circle shows what are the limits of what the species does in its native range. And the yellow circle is showing what the limits the species is doing in that region we see there around Cyprus. There is some overlap, but they are different. In blue, it's the limits that everything that the species could do in theory, because each species has its own limits. We are not going to see a fish climbing a tree, for example. So there are things that are out of the possibilities. The problem is that it's difficult to know all the blue if we don't get to know the species extremely well. If we knew the blue, we would have much better predictions for our alien species. So my project is to try to get closer to knowing what are all the possibilities that the species can do. And for that, we get all the observations that we have, and we keep accumulating knowledge. And as we have more knowledge about the alien distribution of the species, we get closer to filling those gaps within the blue circle, the fundamental niche of the species. And with this accumulative approach, we are getting closer and closer to being able to produce better predictions for the species distribution in the alien range. So each of these pizza slices represents one of the regions where the species has been observed. And as we collect the data and we calculate the size of this blue circle that I showed before, we get like a bigger and bigger picture of the what the species can do. But at one point, it doesn't matter if we accumulate more and more knowledge, we see that this curve is not growing more, we reach an asymptote. So what does the model tell us at this point? The model is telling us, you have collected enough data to get close to knowing all the possible behaviors of this species. Once the curve gets flat and we find the asymptotes, we are able to produce better models, and we are able to predict the possible behaviors of the species, because after so many observations, we don't see new things that the species is doing, and we believe that we are getting to know the fundamental niche. One of the groups of alien species, I could say, are the Lessepian species. These species are named as a tribute to Count Ferdinand de Lesseps, who was responsible for the construction of the Suez Canal. So although those species are not being brought by humans from the Red to the Med, they are only coming here because of an artificial canal, so they are considered aliens. They would not arrive in the Mediterranean by their own fins. And there are about 400 species, non-tubuloception, 110 fish, and all invertebrates, crabs, and they find a much warmer and plenty of food environment in the Mediterranean than they have in the Red Sea. So they arrive here and they really thrive, and it can be a serious problem to some of the local communities. So what I'm looking for during my postdoc is to understand those mechanisms and to produce risk assessments of which species would be a problem if they arrive in the Mediterranean coming through the Suez Canal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eduardo. Questions? Hi, my name is Maria from the Weizmann Institute of Science. I have what it can be a very naive question, but when you have aliens, as you say, I mean, how do they arrive to that place? Because I can understand that, for instance, with we live in an interconnected world now, and a mosquito, I can understand that someone bring it wherever in a plane or a boat or I don't know. But what about the lionfish or these parrots, these green little parrots are everywhere? So how do they arrive?
Yes, that's a very good question, and there's not one answer to it. So how do aliens arrive where they are? There are several ways. One of them is the simple fact of someone decided to bring them and put them there. So I was born and raised in South America, and it's full of pigeons everywhere. We should have parrots, but it's pigeons, because the Portuguese decided that they wanted their colony to look more like the metropole, and they just bred pigeons and put them around. In Australia, they have lots of plant species that are actually from the UK, because the British said, yeah, we wanted to look like home, so they created those acclimation societies. So there is a lot of on-purpose things. There's a very interesting paper that compares colonial powers and the colonialism to the alien floras, and you wouldn't expect that South Africa, Australia, and the United States would have a similar flora, but they do, because the British brought them there. Similarly, the Dutch colonies have similar flora. So that's like the easiest and like on-purpose way. A lot of it is by accident also. So you go to Europe, you hike, you come back, your boots have seeds, and you walk on the forest in Israel, those seeds can hatch. Transport routes, so you buy vegetables from another place, and then insects come. The fish is a different story. The larvae are very small, and when ships go around, they bring water from the sea inside of them for like the weights, and then they release this water when they arrive in other places, and that's one of the ways. Some of the fish actually swim through the canal, because the canal is getting saltier and saltier by the years. Another way of introduction is people that have things as pets and they release them. So the lionfish also in some areas of the world, like in the Caribbean, people buy them because they're beautiful, put them in the fish tank, and then they start eating the others, and then they release. And it is everything. Fish normally eat when they are hungry. The lionfish eats because it likes to eat. So yeah, another thing that people don't think about is that we buy those things to attract birds with seeds. Sometimes those seeds are not native from the country, and then the birds get them. Plants are released from gardens. There's several ways of aliens arriving to places.
Thank you.
Hey, Yala from Tel Aviv University. Really interesting. I was wondering, your talk reminded me of a talk I heard several years ago about what enables certain species to be domesticated. So they argued there that there are species that have the potential to become domesticated, and you see that they're domesticated in different continents. So I was wondering, when you said that, there is a barrier to becoming an alien, and most species would not be able to cross it. Do you see with your model that there are species where they kind of have the capacity to become alien? Is there something about a specific trait that makes you a successful invader?
Thank you very much. If I understood well, you want to know if there are specific traits for becoming alien or becoming invasive. Let's separate those two things. Becoming alien means that the species is going to establish a population unaided from humans. So if you're talking about a plantation or like some cattle, this is not considered alien. This is a domesticated population. Then once they become feral, that they have their own population without human aid, then they are alien. And they are considered invasive if they are causing any damage, either to the environment, to health. And yes, there are studies pointing that some specific traits help them becoming alien, and some other traits help them becoming invasive. Let's say a species has traits that allows it to resist, a plant is resistant to drought, for example, but also can live in more moisty environments. This is a good trait for becoming alien, because it's going to, it's like the difference between the blue and the green circles are big, so there's a lot of room for new behaviors and niche realizations, that's how we would call that in biology. The traits for becoming invasive, there can be many of them, but one of them for sure is being a vector for diseases, if we're talking about invasiveness for human health. But also traits that make the species a good competitor is normally a trait for invasion, because a lot of the invasiveness comes from out-competing native species.
Hey there, beautiful presentation. Two questions. Firstly, in the project, how many species are you studying? And also, I wanted to know if the species that you are focusing on have any trait in common. Are they all sea creatures, or you're focusing on a wide range of species?
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm mostly a theoretical ecologist, but I also have a study case. So yes, I am working mostly with fish because that's the data that we have more plentiful. But the idea is that the theory would apply for all kinds of invasions. And I'm starting with 106 species of fish. Those are the species that we know that have crossed the canal. I'm not sure if we are going to be able to reach these asymptotes, because some of them have only been observed in 2 or 3 points. So we are going to increase a little bit our knowledge, but we are still not going to be able to know everything the species can do. But yes, the idea is not to find a way of being always able to make those predictions, but finding a way of evaluating if our predictions are good or not. All models are bad, but some of them are useful. And I'm trying to get to the point that we can evaluate how useful those models are.
Okay, Rafael from Bar-Ilan. Do we have any successful example of control of invasive species? Because so far as, from what I know, we didn't manage very well when we identify species. So, any?
Yes, we do have some examples of control of invasive species. Not many, and for sure not cheap. In Tasmania, for example, they had a case of invasiveness, and then they had some hares that were invasive there, like big rabbits, that people brought there, the colonizers, and then they were destroying the local vegetation. To control it, people brought cats, but then the cats were not able to control completely the hares, but they were also eating the local mammals. So the worst kind of control is when you bring one species to control the other. But then, actually, I'm contradicting myself, because then they brought dogs to control the cats and the hares. And at this point it worked because the dogs were very well trained, and all the dogs were taken away from the island. So yeah, but it comes always at a very, very high cost. So the best way is try to prevent. Plants can be easier to control. Also, before deciding to destroy an alien species because it's invasive, we have to do an assessment of what role the species is playing in the local biodiversity. There is a case from some parts of the coast of Brazil where they decided, very good initiative, like let's make our coast like the beautiful trees to give shade for the cars around the beach, all native trees. Then they had like those 30-year-old trees that were all alien. They went and cut all of them and planted very small native trees. Okay, for the shades, it's going to take some time. But what they didn't realize that the native birds that didn't have native trees were nesting on the alien trees. So all of the things even fighting against aliens is something that we need to do an assessment before, because we don't know all the connections between the species and how everything can fall down if we cut one.
Thank you, Eduardo.
Thank you very much.